Hello, and welcome to You Might Have Missed It. Today we're doing a slight change of plans in that we will be doing Hearthstone, but it's not going to be my regular account, at least not on Sundays. I'm going to be doing a kind of series of videos talking a little bit about essentially getting started in Hearthstone and how to do it. Because one thing that I've noticed is a lot of people don't necessarily, or they feel a little bit overwhelmed by getting started in this particular game because there's a lot of information out there, but I think a lot of it comes from kind of a competitive space, which is good. I love competitive Hearthstone. I love playing it. But I kind of want to go through and just do a very basic start for this. The point of this is a free-to-play account. I'm not going to be spending any money on this particular account. Not because I don't think it's valuable to do so, but because I think that not a lot of people are going to start Hearthstone with the intention of, going all the way. The other thing that we're not going to be doing is going for legend rank from a free-to-play account. I think it's definitely possible. Streamers have shown that it can be done. It is not a unreachable goal. It's definitely a difficult one, especially if you're just starting out in Hearthstone. But I do think it's an unrealistic goal and an unrealistic expectation to set for a lot of people, because most people will never go for legendary. They simply want to play the game, have some fun, and really do it. But I think that there's a lot of basic stuff that you can do at the beginning that can make the experience more enjoyable along the way. So what I'm going to do is kind of go through this. We're going to start out, I think, with the tutorial quests, and then we'll kind of get into the meat and potatoes of this, because the tutorial quests really explain themselves. So let's go and get started. Ooh. 5-mana fireball.
Oh, a new challenger. It's Jaina Proudmore, the maid. Who will accept this challenge? Oh, the scourge of
Right, so obviously this is not going to be the most compelling entertainment as I go through the tutorial level.
Let the battle begin!
I'm just going to be playing this straight because there are some things you can do. Try and deck your opponent during the tutorial, which seems a little crazy.
Need some minions to fight for me. Well, at least he didn't play a card this turn.
Augur Face Hunter confirmed. So the tutorial is probably obviously the simplest thing you're ever going to do in
Another
this particular
minion,
game.
just what I needed. Excellent. I've got you right where I want you.
But it's still pretty fun.
2 cards. Ugh, he must have been saving one. Should I attack a gnome or Hogger himself? That's not enough damage to kill my 5 attack. That thing is huge.
I mean, it's a bit odd. The tutorial does spend a lot of time talking
gnome,
to itself.
Or go for his master. I'm coming for you next, Hogger. A spell card. It can only be used once, so I better make it count.
Oh. Alright, step 1 done.
Back to the stockades with you, Hogger.
Jaina versus Millhouse Manastorm.
This might be the most annoying thing in this particular game.
Jaina, prepare to face the mighty Millhouse Mana Storm! I wanted to go first!
I'd really love to mulligan the fireball here, but it's not going to let me.
What kind of minion is that? A murloc? Ow! Ow! This card is incredible! Just you wait until I get some more mana.
My mana has been restored.
Stop attacking me! I'm trying to win this game! Another mana! Here it comes! You know what this feels like?
What?
Winning! Duh! Yeah! Watch the mustache! You're gonna love this!
I think Millhouse accurately represents why talking to your opponent, if they were just some random asshole, is never a great idea.
Hit it very hard.
Because it would be like this.
Until I have 10 mana. Hurry! I can't wait to play this card! Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on! Jaina! I hope you like Doom!
Handle it! Hit it very hard.
You'll be hearing from my lawyers!
Jaina versus Lord Walker Cho.
Oh, Jaina, it is
Fun
good
fact,
to
this is
see
the
you.
4th time that I've done this tutorial.
Lore Walker Cho.
I wish there was a skip
Show
button.
me what you've learned.
I will not hold back.
Good, good. I am not all that handy with swords or bows, but I do have many friends.
Yes, Lord Walker.
Even a single point of damage can mean the difference between victory and defeat.
My respects, Elder. Yes, Lord Walker.
Handle it!
My respects, Elder.
You cannot reach me!
For now. After I destroy your troops, I'm coming for you.
Hit it very hard! Oh, you are quite powerful. I have made some new friends who can heal as well as fight.
Someone call for the...
Handle it! Hit it very hard. Hit it very hard. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to an upset tummy. War should be a last resort.
They'll never.
You are naive, Lord Walker.
Perhaps.
Hit it very hard.
You are very strong, Jaina.
Oh, if you're sure.
You are a true master.
It's been an honor, Lord Walker.
Jaina versus King Mukla.
Really hate during the tutorials they don't allow you to do the mulligans, and so in my head I'm staring at the cards and thinking and going through the mulligans in my head and like,
It's
oh,
King
well,
Mukla. Get him while he's
I don't want to play
alone.
that. But,
Why are these monkeys throwing bananas at me? You crazy monkeys. Is that all you've got, Mukla? Just barrels?
Ready to rise.
Someone call for the doctor.
My steel.
Kill that ape so I can finish off Mukla.
Taste my steel.
I hope you like my invention.
Tazdingo. Yes.
Oh, if you're sure.
Steel. Ready for action.
Do you hear something? What the?
so strong. 6 mana.
Oh, if you're sure.
I don't think that's the last we'll see of
I
Mukla.
think that's actually probably one of the more interesting tutorial battles, because if you go through it more than once, and obviously most sane human beings never will,
Jaina versus
you do
the
learn
one,
there's
the
multiple
only,
lines of play
him
that
it,
can
missing
lead to
lady.
success. You can choose to take out the 10-10, or you can choose to go after Mukla.
Well,
And neither one is
you
necessarily
have
the
plenty
wrong
wise.
line of play. So
Watch your tongue.
Eh? Nobody talks to old Hemet like that. Ha! I go first.
But I get an extra card.
Oh, good. 'Cause you'll need it.
just want to mulligan these 3.
know, this reminds me of the time I was stalking the great tiger, Bangalash.
It's beast hunting time!
A beast? I'll make a trophy of it! Hey, now you're probably used to fighting against minions. Hemet fights his own battles!
I have some tricks of my own, dwarf.
Ha-ha! Shotgun!
Stunt!
1 health. A perfect target.
Ready for action! Tell me, have you read me book, The Green Hills of Stranglethorn? Handle it! Handle it! I'll skin that beast! I need a new scarf. Aye, maybe I should go back to writing. What you want? To arms! Ready to ride! Very hard! Bow down before my huge bog creature!
I need to find a way to neutralize that thing.
Oh, that's no fair! Very hard! Yes!
They'll never know what.
And that's the end of your safari, Nessingwary.
This is one of the
versus Illidan
more interesting
Stormrage.
views you can get on the AI that they sometimes use, which is
You are not
or the older AI, because it misplays a lot and you can kind of force
I
it
don't know.
into these
I just
weird
played 5 missions.
board states and game states. They've greatly improved the AI for a lot of like the adventure modes since this came out, and some of that comes in here, but it's interesting how actually hard it is to lose this particular matchup, despite the very strong
cards
abilities
that
and
cost
heroes
1 mana.
powers that they
This will
give
be
Illidan here.
Feel the hatred of 10,000 years. Stare into the eyes of the betrayer! Who shall be next to taste my blades? Behold the flames of Azeroth!
His hero power. It's so strong.
You know nothing of power! Tadingo!
Like there, obviously, would have been much better to go for killing off that one. That's what I think a normal human player would have done.
action! Ready to ride! Face my steel! Behold the power of the demon within! Tadingo! Face my steel! I will not be touched by rabble such as you.
I'll fly in!
Such arrogance!
I cannot believe it! You and your mage deck are unstoppable!
All right, so welcome to the actual beginning of Hearthstone. Once you get through those tutorial levels, you have kind of more freedom to actually play the game if you want to. I'm not going to comment too much on the tutorials because I actually think that they're quite good for this type of game. But when you start out, you're presented with the Win 5 practice game. So obviously they're leading you
You can
towards
unlock new
a
heroes
specific
in practice
place
mode.
that they want you to go, which is practice mode. And it's sometimes a little tempting to skip something like that, especially after you've finished the first fight. But I don't necessarily think that you should, especially if you're just starting out. You probably want to take that time for a couple different reasons. The first reason is that it gives you time to get used to the game itself, and
To unlock heroes,
really
you need to
learn
defeat
how
them.
interactions
Challenge your
work.
favorite hero first.
and really kind of get a sense of how the game goes forward.
Personally, I'd choose Uther the Paladin.
I've never let him sit there long enough to actually get him to do that. The other reason is that if you beat them all, if you unlock all of the heroes, there are some hidden quests that you can get that will get you some additional gold and some additional, like an arena entry, that sort of thing. Although we won't be covering arena here. I think that's not a more advanced topic, but something that you shouldn't jump into until you've got at least the basics down and have a better idea of how to do things like evaluate cards, that sort of thing. Which we'll cover in another video. The first thing you want to do, though, before you jump into the solo adventures is realize that the decks that Blizzard provides are just really terrible. They're functional. You can win
This
games
is a
with
great
them.
place to make a custom deck with your favorite cards.
But ultimately, there are better decks out there. So what we're going to do is we're going to start out with what is essentially a basic mage. And there are two forms to this particular deck. This is going to be the one that we'll do for this particular tutorial. And then after I finish off the each of the classes, I will show you the full version of each of the decks. That just use basic cards. So no classic packs, no nothing like that. Yep, new series. I'm going to be taking a basic account, and we're not going to Legend. But I'm going to kind of go over, starting out, some basic skills you need to know, and go from there. So let's go ahead and get this particular deck built. I need to pull it up for myself here as well, because unfortunately my preview pane is very small, and I can't actually read the deck list from there. Although I can sort of remember it. And there's actually multiple ways if you're just starting out with a new account to get through these opening quests. I believe that games against other people will actually get you through the solo quest, but I'm not 100% on that. I have not extensively tested that. All right. There is a deck list. So, in missiles.
Tap near the edge of a page to flip through your collection.
Fireballs and both polymorphs. From there we have Swamp Oozes, Moving Raptor, Winter Warrior, Hunter, Shattered Sun Cleric, Fireball, Chillwind, an old favorite. Gnomish Inventor, also an old favorite. Actually, a current favorite. Use that in a lot of decks. Frostwolf Warlord, Older Fist Ogre, and Storm Champions.
That deck looks solid. Take her out for a spin.
Thanks, Innkeeper guy. That deck does look solid. And a lot of these basic decks are going to look really similar because, one, you have a limited card pool to work with. And then the other part of it is that there are a lot of cards in the basic packs that are not great. Which is not to say they're bad. They have their uses in certain places, and they certainly do help fill out, again, not going to talk too much about the arena, but some of that stuff. Some of the more limited environments that you'll find yourself in. But for the most part, a lot of them share the same shell. So let's go ahead and start with the Hunter. I'm just going to go down the line here. And again, these are not the most engaging opponents, but I think if you're just starting out, they do make a good testing ground to see how much you retain from the tutorial.
If you don't like some of those cards, you can replace them.
I don't like any of these cards, so I'm going to replace all of these. No, that's actually a good way to do it, is to play through all of these basics and then climb to rank 20. The other thing you can do is actually go through and, I'll cover this a little bit later, but you can play through the advanced AI, because that actually nets you another 100 gold once you finish that. So, what I'm talking about is we have the choice here between the Bloodfend Raptor and the Acidic Swamp Ooze. It's an interesting choice because they're both 3/2s for 2, but the Acidic Swamp Ooze has a battle cry that will destroy an opponent's weapon. I know from experience that this deck doesn't have any weapons, but Hunters, as a general rule, can. So when you're kind of evaluating which cards to play and when to play them, this is actually more of a tech card. This is a card you play because of that battle cry, less so because of the body on the creature. Just an interesting tidbit there. Oof, getting outvalued by an AI. I could kill the boar, but I think it's actually a better idea to play something onto the board and force them to deal with it, because I do still have some playables in the hand to come.
Don't mess with Tusk. Don't mess with Tusk. Sucks.
Yeah, just starting out, saving gold is, I don't think it's necessarily something you need to do. I think expanding your collection is probably the best thing that you can do early in Hearthstone.
The Frost Wolves stand ready.
Sucks.
All right. So this is actually an interesting point to have the Murloc in hand, because the Murloc is not actually a creature in any of the decks that it's in that I'm going to present here. It's actually a 2 damage spell, which is a weird thing to I think include as part of that. But
We must cleanse the Sunwell.
it's an interesting interaction that you don't always get. Ooh, scary.
Forward.
For the Horde!
Oof.
Behold the might of Stormwind!
A 2-mana spell with occasional.
Locked and loaded.
For the Horde!
And there we go. So I know for a lot of people, me especially, when I'm just starting out with something, I will usually take something like the mage and just continue on all the way through. And the couple times where I've made a free to play account, just essentially for fun, just to kind of experience it again, that's usually what I will end up doing, is choosing kind of one class and sticking to it, which is a good long-term strategy and something you may consider. I would recommend, if you're just first playing though, would be to play through all of the classes. And again, I'm going to present all of some of the basic decks for you as we go through. So that was the basic mage deck. Once you get to level 10 and you've unlocked all of the wrong scene there, all of the basic cards, you can end up with a mage that will look a little bit more like this. And you can kind of see where replacements have been made, where things have been shifted out as you unlock new cards. And most of what you'll unlock is new spells, which make the mage a really good kind of control-y type of deck, controlling mid-range type of deck, which is a great thing to have. So yeah, you can take a look at that list, and as you level up, unlock the cards, make those types of subs out, and it turns into a really fun deck to play. I've gotten pretty far with that particular archetype there. All right, now let's go into Hunter. Hunter is, again, it's going to look pretty similar. Hunter can be built a couple different ways, though. From the basic packs, I tend towards a little bit more value-based decks. But you can actually make a very, 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 very basic, highly aggressive Hunter out of the cards that are available. At some point I may go into that particular archetype, but today I'm going to try and focus on getting through as much of this early content as I can. So let me go ahead and pull up the Hunter deck. All right. Tracking. Wolf, multi-shot, and double master. The other thing with Hunter is that you actually do end up wanting to go with more of a beast sub-theme. So you end up using some cards that you actually won't see in the other decks, including the Ironfur Grizzly, which a 3/3 for 3 for a taunt, among all of the cards that are available, is not actually as strong, I think, as some of the options can be within the deck. Let's see. Houndmaster, Oasis Snapshot, which is a really great combination with the Houndmaster here. Otherwise, it's the 2/7 with no kind of additional upside for 4. Just normally wouldn't make it into a deck like this. And Storm Champion. There is some temptation to use something like a Core Hound in a deck like this as kind of your upper end of creature. The reason that it's not a particularly good one is that while it does have a lot of power, it has a really low toughness for its cost, which means that there's just too many other things that can essentially trade up for it when you're playing against an opponent. So even though it feels like a big bomb, it's really not that big. And Boulder Fist Ogre, I think, is just superior to it in pretty much every way. All right, what am I missing here? Go back through the cards here. Single Ooze, Double Crocolisk, Grizzly, Razorfen, Shattered Sun, Chillwind Yeti, Houndmaster, Oasis Snapjaw, Shieldmaster, oh, and Stone Tusk Boar, which is again more included for some minor beast synergy with the Timberwolf. As you kind of go further in and start getting like classic packs, those two will tend to disappear from this particular list. All right. Let's go ahead and give it a whirl. And continuing on down the line to Warrior.
Rexar versus Garrosh.
Victory or death! Let the hunt begin.
So this is a weird hand as far as mulliganing goes. I'm going to keep the Arcane Shot because it is good removal for anything that ends up getting played. But the Timberwolf is not actually a 1-drop. The Timberwolf is something you want to play when you have other things on the board that will synergize fairly well with it. So I tend to get rid of that out of the opening hand, unless there's just an obvious synergy early on. This is an interesting matchup when you have Hunter versus the Warrior, because their powers just synergize against each other, or not synergize, but work against each other. So armor up, deal with the armor. Armor up, deal with the armor. And times like this are where I wish I had the Swamp Ooze in hand. My luck at calling cards is not there.
Tazdingo! Yes!
So tracking is a card that a lot of people have intense dislike for, and I've never quite understood why. Well, I understand why. It's because it feels like you're losing 2 cards in the process. The thing that it gives you is a large amount of card selection, which ends up being really, really key in a lot of matchups. I think we don't really have a great line of play here, but I think...
Don't mess with
Hunter.
Tusk.
We must cleanse the Sunwell.
Tazdingo! Yes! Tazdingo! Yes!
Yeah, let's see what we can have here. I will take that.
Behold the might of Stormwind!
Just me and Mr. Bitey.
Look at that!
We must cleanse the Sunwell.
The gates are open.
Me smash! I'll let the dogs out.
Push forward.
There we go. Living the dream.
For the Alliance!
510.
Forward!
Druid level taunt there.
For the Alliance!
Alright. So, next up we have the Warrior. The Warrior's interest me is it's the first time that you're really introduced to just how valuable weapons are in Hearthstone. And I think it's a kind of one of the better classes to play as a beginner because it does reward you, I think, more than other ones for smart play with those types of cards. All right, let's see. Vorax, Elven Archer. And Elven Archer is in here because of a synergy with Execute that makes it quite good. Shell. Back. Yeti. Shield Master. Stormpike Commando is in here because Warrior, at least in a basic level, lacks a lot of reach and extra damaging abilities. So this fills a huge gap that can otherwise be left in the Warrior build. It kind of fills a similar role to the Elven Archer up at the top there. All right, I keep missing something in these decks. Execute, Elven Archer 1, Fiery Vorax, Single Strike, Swamp Ooze, Bloodfriend Raptor, Razorpin Hunter, Shattered Sun Cleric, Warsong Commander, oh, and Wolf Rider. And Wolf Rider fills again a similar role as the Bluegill Warrior does in other decks. I just think that Warrior can actually stand to have a slightly higher curve than other decks because of the hero power, which lets you survive a little bit longer. All right, next up, Shaman.
Garrosh versus Thrall.
For Doomhammer! Victory or death!
I'm going to try and aggressively mulligan for a 2-drop or a weapon. I actually kind of like having Shattered Sun Cleric in the deck.
You're going second, so you get the coin. Use it wisely.
Indeed. So there's a temptation here to use the coin, but I'm going to resist that temptation, and I urge you, unless you have a very specific plan for probably your first 4 turns, just hold the coin. Or you have a very specific plan for the deck in general. Like if it's a very fast, aggressive deck, using the coin early can be a really good idea. But I highly, highly recommend that you learn to rein that urge in to just throw the coin out there and hold on to it for later turns when it can actually allow you to do something really surprising for your opponent or against your opponent. So I'm just going to pass. I'm not going to stare at that beautiful coin and the possibilities that I could drop a fiery war axe now and just deal with things. So in this case, because I have a second turn 3 play, this is where I'm going to use the coin to develop out the Razorfen Hunter. I could continue to hold it on turn 4, use the Stormpike Commando, just any number of things that could be done here. But since I actually have a good
We must cleanse the
turn 3
Sunwell.
play here, especially since he didn't kill the minion on the board, I feel okay about that decision.
Tazdingo!
Push forward.
That was a misplay. I should have done that in the opposite order with those two.
I've got a huge guy!
Push forward.
Although in this case, even though I couldn't have known that would be more correct, it ended up being more correct.
We must cleanse the Sunwell.
I'm ready!
So this is actually normally kind of a bad idea. I'm playing out my board a little bit too much. And that could come and bite me in the ass a little bit later, because shamans have AoE spells that can just clear a board out pretty easily. And they're pretty commonly run in most shaman decks. I know for a fact that my opponent doesn't have that, so I can feel a little bit more comfortable filling up the board like this and not have to worry about just a sudden sweep ruining all of my plans. Alright, so it's possible that I have lethal this turn, so let us count the ways. 4, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and I do. Alright, so the wax comes out.
Push forward.
Always count for lethal. Because my initial reaction to that was to try and trade more favorably for myself.
Doomhammer!
And keep more minions on the board rather than trade with the axe and try and do something like that. So, alright. But those are advanced things. Let's move on to Shaman. And Shaman is probably actually the one that uses the least number of its own class cards, because the basic cards they start you out with kind of suck. Rockbiter is really good, Hex is pretty okay, and Wind Fury is more in there because it's a decent surprise card. You can pull it out on people and they will not be expecting, say, like your Bull-Defist Ogre to suddenly be dealing 12 damage in one turn or something like that. But this one uses by far the least number of, I believe, class cards out of almost any of them. So this deck is a little bit different because you're taking on more, different than the other ones. You'll see the shell, again, pretty similar to everything else. But we're including something like Murloc Tidehunter in here, where normally that card would be kind of like, it's not great. It's 2 mana for essentially a 3/2, but spread across 2 bodies, which isn't always good, because it gives your opponent more options for dealing with the individual bodies, especially when they're that small. In this case, however, it's actually pretty good, because you have a lot of synergy with the Frostwolf Warlord later. One of the goals of this deck is to try and get a lot of minions on the board, and then play out just gigantic warlords, that sort of thing. Or to just give your opponent way too many targets to deal with throughout the game. Oops, forget the Yeti there. Nope, got the Yeti. Warlord, Fest, and Storm Champion. Other things that I actually considered including in this particular deck, and something you could experiment with outside of it, is using raid leaders because of the totem mechanic. And we'll kind of get into that once we get into the game itself. But I find the raid leader is a little bit overcosted for the effect that it provides. And up against Druid. Oops, let's get the correct deck on the screen here.
I must protect the wild.
For Doomhammer.
There we go. Alright, so I'm going to keep this hand, and I'm going to keep the Elven Archer in it. Not because I think that I'm going to be playing the Archer on turn 1, but because it's just kind of a good little tech card to have a little bit later in the game, I think. It's always tempting to play this out, but that 1 damage is probably actually better used on a minion or something like that, rather than being used on face or something similar. Since I know that Druids don't have weapons, I'm going to go ahead and play the Swampies out. The other option would have been to make a totem. Shaman is also kind of the first class that introduces random elements
We must cleanse the sun
into the game, with the totem being one of 4 possible totems. One of them being a taunt totem, which is a 0/2 with taunt. A spell power totem, which is a 0/2 that provides +1 damage to all your spells. A healing totem, which is a 0/2 that then heals all of the minions on the board for 1 health. And finally, a flame tongue totem, which is a 1/1, just a basic 1/1. They're all semi-useful. I think this turn, though, I'm actually going to end up playing a totem. Just because I can play the totem and play out the ooze, which again lets me fill up the board, and hopefully I can get something good later. And that is exactly the totem I actually wanted, that or the taunt totem. So there's a 50-50 chance there of picking up a good totem for myself. So, alright, perfect. This accurately shows why holding the Elven Archer is such a great idea. So, trade.
One shot,
Ping.
one kill.
And in this case, I'm actually going to make the healing totem useful for myself.
Push forward.
Because you can use these cards to buff the totems, you can actually end up with a lot more usable minions on the board than you might expect. One thing to note with the totems is that they do not repeat themselves. So when I roll a totem again, I will only have a chance of getting one of the 3 totems that are left over. So you can't end up with like 2 healing totems on the board. You can't end up with a lot of stuff like that. Alright, so the Frostwolf Warlord. This is a tempting card to be really greedy with and keep playing out minions and hoping that you're going to get some sort of really great synergy with them. We have lethal. So I actually have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Sorry, we don't have lethal. So we're going to continue to trade stuff. However, I think it's best to always play the Frostwolf Warlord when you have a fairly large board. 2 minions is fine. A 6/6 for 5 is awesome. This is pretty incredible, though. So I am perfectly happy to take something of this size. Clear the minions because we don't quite have lethal yet. And that's kind of an important thing to get used to, is that you want to clear minions until you have a clear shot at killing your opponent that turn. So until just a moment ago, we did not have lethal. We now have lethal.
Behold the might of sword!
And it's effects like armor and healing, that if you're pushing towards lethal, you're trying to get your opponent down. Never count on having lethal the first time that you see it. So if you see lethal, like, oh, I'll have lethal in 2 turns, if I just go for face and ignore all of the minions on his board. Usually not a good idea if you can make good trades along those lines. Because you never know when they're going to get an armor up, or you never know when they're going to pull a healing card out or something like that.
Protect the wild.
Usually only want to go for lethal when you have it. Unless you're playing a specific type of strategy. So, interesting little things you can do there. Next up, Druid. Let me pull my own deck list up here. So Druid is an interesting class because it has a lot of abilities that ramp. And what ramping means is that instead of the normal curve of mana where you go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, a lot of times you'll jump in a Druid deck. You'll go from 1 to 3, or you'll go from 2 to 4 or something like that. So you can actually play out with a higher curve with a Druid, meaning the number of low drops you have doesn't have to be quite as high as it does in other decks, which is really nice and really fun, and sometimes a little scary. In this case, I'm playing a lot more like 4 drops and stuff like that, because more often than not, that's where I'm going to end up stuck at, is kind of the 4 slot for a Druid. I'm also playing stuff like Stormpipe Commando, because one, you can ramp into it a little bit more easily, and it provides a little bit more direct damage for you if you need it. You could also play things like the Reckless Rocketeer, or even the Archmage or something like that, just for some extra stats on the board. And for the first time, we're actually going to be playing something like War Golem, which normally not a great card overall, but it can be a lot of fun when you can pull something like that out on turn 5, or potentially even earlier. It's a hard threat for people to deal with on the board that quickly. All right. Oops. Found the wrong place to go here. And up against Priest.
Malfurion versus Anduin.
The
Welcome back.
light shall bring victory.
I must protect the wild.
Okay, so we're going to pretty much mulligan this entire hand. It has a lot of really good high drops that we could play, but ultimately that's not really what we're looking for. We're either looking for ways to curve out well, or we're looking for ways to ramp into a better curve somehow. And this is actually a kind of a great way to do that. So on turn 1, we could play out the Razorfen Hunter, which could be an interesting play. But ultimately, I think we want to save the ramp for things like the Ogre and the War Golem. So for now, we're just going to play pretty passively and let things develop as they need to.
For the wild.
Is someone injured?
So there's a point here where I could either play the Swamp Ooze or I could play the Razorfen Hunter. And against most opponents, I would actually choose the Razorfen Hunter over the Swamp Ooze, because this puts 2 bodies on the board, this only puts the 1. Against the Priest, that's not really an option because of the hero power, which if I put the Razorfen Hunter down, the Priest can just throw the Cleric into the boar, heal the Cleric, and then draw a card off of that. And that's something that I really, really do not want. I'm actually also a little bit tempted to not play even the Swamp, because there are certain ways that the Priest could buff the Cleric, still hit the Ooze, or still hit anything, and still draw the card. And ultimately, that's what I would like to prevent, is them drawing the card. I know that card is not present, though, so I'm not going to play around that being a possibility. Alright, turn 4. So this turn we could actually play out the Golem using the Coin and the Innervate, but there's still a lot of good options in hand right now, and there's still this Cleric on board, which is going to have to be dealt with eventually. So I think actually the Shield Master is the correct play.
Yes.
Alright, so there's a couple different correct plays, but none that really use up our mana particularly efficiently. So I think this turn I am going to end up ramping out the War Golem. And then next turn I will play the Ogre on card.
We must cleanse the Sunwell.
Or could play out the Stormwind Champion, but I would rather play out the Stormwind Champion when I actually have a ability to support it.
One shot, one kill.
What you want?
Alright, so Wild Growth being one of our ramping cards is interesting. Could play it now, but that's not a good idea, because Wild Growth has an interesting effect that is not written on the card, which I think is a mistake on Blizzard's part, which is if you're at maximum mana, so if you're at 10 mana crystals, you can play out the Wild Growth, and what you'll get is an extra spell that just lets you draw a card. So Wild Growths are never useless in your hand, but it's not always apparent that they're not. So just something to keep in mind with that particular card. This turn I think I'm going to use the Coin, depending on what I get with the Gnomish Inventor, to coin out either another Gnomish Inventor, or in this case, the Dragonling Mechanic.
Me and Mr. Bite.
A big part of what I'm trying to do here is fill the board up so that the Stormwind Champion actually becomes really, really useful. So I could play the Stormwind Champion this turn, but because I can't get through the taunt unless I use this, and there's not really a... Actually, no, the Stormwind Champion will let me clear pretty effectively. But so will the Gnomish Inventor. So I think I'm going to play that instead. Hero Power. Clear there.
For the wild.
Hey, give me a minute. Yeah.
And then ultimately sacrifice those two to deal with the Alright, so this is a little scary because there's not a really simple way to clear this, except that there is. So what we're going to do is play out the Stormwind Champion.
Behold the might of Stormwind!
Hero Power. and
For the wild.
willingly take 9 to the face
Hey, give me a minute.
in order to deal with that minion, which, when you're just starting out, the idea of willingly slamming your character in and taking 9 damage is probably the worst thing in the world to deal with. But one thing you have to realize is that this number doesn't matter until it hits 0. So you want to make sure that you're using your health as a resource, just like you would your mana crystals, just like you would your minions. Taking that 9 damage now means that I get to save the 7/5, the 3/5, all for sacrificing a 2-drop creature to take out his 7-drop, and a little bit of health. So overall, a good trade, I think. However, it's a trade that I can only make once. So even though we saved the 7-drop, it's not going to live through this next turn. So I think this turn will end up being the War Golem,
Don't mess.
the Razorkin Hunter. Trade that
Give me a minute.
off and swing in. One interesting thing the Priest teaches you, especially when you're facing off against it and when you're playing it, is just how valuable minion health is within the game. Because you can constantly heal for 2, you can make trades that would otherwise be a little bit unthinkable, because it would be like, why would I ever trade this 2/7 into something like this when you can just clear it with something else later, or this 3/2 into a 1/1 when, you know, you can just kill it in a second. You can actually heal up damage on your minions, which I think are more important 90% of the time than healing your face. Again, using this as a resource. So the Priest is an interesting control and attrition deck, which we'll see in the next segment. And just kind of show you the functionality of the growth there. Play it, get excess mana, draw it. Cool. And then we'll win the game.
The Alliance!
Give me a minute.
All right. We've earned our first pack.
The light shall bring victory.
Which I will open more towards the end of the stream, because I don't want to start getting classic cards kind of mixed up into the basic sets yet. We also get the next new quest, which is to complete a game in play mode. First things first, though, I think we're going to finish up, again, with the rest of the basic decks here. So let's go ahead and create our Priest deck. Okay. Let's get that up on screen here. There we go. And this is the card I was talking about that he could have comboed with the Nordstrom Cleric. And actually I didn't realize, forgotten for some reason, it was part of the basic set, which I definitely should not have actually forgotten. Priest is one of the few classes that I tend to use all of the basic, the first set of basic cards in the deck, because they're all actually so good for these types of decks. With maybe the exception of Mind Blast, which you could potentially trade off for another minion. But I find the surprise of having that deal 5 hero damage to be really good, especially in a deck where otherwise you're playing more of a control style. Having this kind of burst is actually really useful for getting a leg up on most of your opponents. The downside is that you will end up trading some smaller utility type creatures. The other thing you'll notice is that this is the first time where Bloodfin Raptor isn't included in the deck. If the Acidic Swamp Ooze didn't have this text on the card, I probably wouldn't include it either. The biggest reason being is that as a priest, you can heal your minions. So having a larger butt or a health total on the minion is actually really good within priest decks, because you can end up making a lot of plays that you otherwise wouldn't be able to. But the rest of the deck is going to look pretty... That's not it there. Is going to look pretty similar. Up against the rogue next. Only 3 more to go. Again, I think this is actually fun to do on your first time through, is to play through these individual matches and get used to it. And there's, I have actually, when I was starting out, I think I lost 1 or 2 using some of the basic decks. Mind Blast is always something I'm going to want later in the game. But otherwise we have actually a pretty good curve here. So other than that, I'm going to keep the rest of the cards here. Alright, perfect.
Ready for action!
Because of the kind of the sudden appearance of this, normally I would probably save the coin for a later turn on turn 3, coining out a Yeti or a Shield Master or something like that. But in this case, because I'm relatively confident that my opponent is going to dagger up next turn, I'm going to play the River Crocodile because I know I still have a turn to play, which is going to be to heal the River Crocolisk. So actually the question is now, do I heal it or do I draw the card? And they're almost the same, except with this one there's a minor upside in that it replaces itself. So I think I'm actually going to do that.
Job's done. Locked and loaded.
I could have played out a minion there, but I think keeping this one healthy is, in the long run, going to be a better play. And again, constantly trading back and forth for minions is a good idea, because you never know what's going to happen next.
We must cleanse the Sunwell.
And again, normally that would be a trade, but because we're able to constantly be healing our minions up, we're able to keep actually a really full board and a really fairly full hand by continuing that sort of those sorts of trades. There, get there.
Push forward.
And start pushing damage.
For the king!
Did you catch the misplay?
Don't mess! Push forward.
Again, a couple different options there, but that one uses mana more effectively.
Push forward.
Suck steel swat!
So you can see how the priest healing power, well, it seems a little bit more passive than other ones, can really let you run away with the game.
You're back.
All right. Next, rogue. the rogue on the screen here. Rogue is an interesting class because it requires, I think, at its most basic level, a little bit more thought and planning in terms of using the hero power. All of the classes, I think, do require some sort of like, oh, should I use it here? Do something like that. But the rogue is a little bit more indirect because it lasts more than one turn. And you actually have a lot of cards like Deadly Poison and some other things that let you enhance the hero power, which is unique to the rogue, with the exception of the priest, who does have the ability to change their hero power with an epic card from the classic set. But out of the basic tools that a rogue has, they're the only ones who can do something like this, where they give their own weapon that extra attack power. And they always have access to a weapon. All right. Let me pull up my own rogue list here. All right. Backstab. Strike, 1 sap, 1 assassinate. The reason why I'm not including like 2-ofs for a lot of these, like Assassinate, Sap, and even Sinister Strike, is that each of these is kind of a what's known as a tech card, which is that it's useful in specific situations, but it's not always useful. Assassinate is great, except that it costs a lot. So it's not something that you can use with other cards a lot of times. Assassinate, for the most part, will end up being your entire turn. Sap is really good because it lets you kind of interrupt your opponent's plan, make them play back a really big creature, get rid of a taunt, something like that. But ultimately, you're trading a card to give them another card. So it's not super good, but it does have its uses. And then Sinister Strike, because it only deals damage to the hero, is great for kind of reaching for lethal when you need it. But outside of a couple specific cases with like extra spell power and things like that are a little bit harder to do with the base set of cards, it's not as useful as it could be. Backstab and Deadly Poison are just good cards that can be played with others and lead you to do some really neat things. So again, multiples of those within the deck. All right, and then for the most part, the deck will look pretty similar to, again, most of the other decks. One interesting thing you can do with a rogue is you can build an early kind of basic spell power rogue, and even the advanced deck that I'm going to show that has all of the basic cards doesn't really go that route. But if you're just playing around, you want to play around with that sort of thing, you can include these cards, include things like Sinister Strikes, and make your backstabs, your Sinister Strikes, that sort of thing, even more deadly. And honestly, it's a fun deck to play around with. So if you get a chance, give it a whirl. Cleric, Wolf Rider in this one. A single Dragonlink mechanic. Fist and Stormwind. The Dragonlink mechanic can be either the mechanic there, or it can be the Frostwolf Warlord. That's kind of up to you as far as what you want to do. Both have their uses. In this particular case, I just kind of like having the mechanic in there. I'm not sure why. Up against the Paladin. So, one interesting thing about the order of the basic heroes is that you're for the most part going to be expecting to go in the order that you see there. And it's interesting how much they counter each other as you go through, all the way up until really the end with the Paladin versus Warlock, which isn't really much of a counter. Warlock being one of the more unique classes. So, again, normally I would say hold on to the coin, but because we have so many different options to play on turn 2, and we also have an option that will carry over into the next turn, in this case, playing hero power to clear is a good idea. We also know that the Paladin has the option to make another 1/1 next turn. So
Here we go.
Locked and loaded.
So again, the Murloc as basically a 2 damage clear spell.
Reporting for duty.
Just me and Mr. White.
Reporting for duty.
Here we go.
Don't mess with
Reporting for duty.
Pass me that arc light spanner.
Here we go.
And again, you can't be afraid of taking damage to your face. Whereas I could have cleared the 1/1 out. I think leaving more power on the board and using my own character to clear out everything else was a better idea there. Oh, perfect draw.
Here we go.
Pass me that arc light spanner.
sucks. That's why.
Taste my steel.
Well, still win.
Reporting for duty.
That heal could have been clutch, but it wasn't.
I will fight with honor.
All right. Now we go to Paladin. Let's pull up the basic deck here. Paladin is an interesting class because it kind of combines a lot of the conventions you find in other classes that you've seen up to this point. Things like the warrior, things like the shaman, and even things like the mage, but it focuses it more on a minion-centric deck building style. I'll put my own list here, because again, that preview was a little bit hard to see for me. And again, we don't actually use a lot of class cards from the basic Paladin set, because most of them are going to situational. The Blessing of Might is actually pretty good and can be used in more situations than others. But in this case, I think focusing more on minions within the basic decks is a better idea than trying to force in the Paladin things. And again, the Frostwolf Warlord is actually a strong card. I would actually recommend removing either one of the Boulder Fist Ogres or one of the Stormwind Champions, and including 2 Frostwolf Warlords because of the ability. I made a mistake in this particular deck list by not making that very small change, or even removing one of the 1-drops like the Light's Justice or something similar to that in order to include that extra higher end drop. But one thing I do want to encourage you to do is play around with some of the cards within the deck, which is one of the reasons why I'm using the the Lights Justice within this particular deck is because it can, on some occasions within this specific Paladin build where you don't have access to all of the basic cards, it's actually pretty good.
Your soul shall be mine! I will fight with...
Throw those back and try and get a little bit better curve. Which we didn't really, but this will work. And a perfect Lights Justice target.
For justice! For justice!
And this is one of the reasons why the Blessing Hand is definitely a good move in the deck. The other thing we could have done to save that is use the Hand of Protection against it. I'm actually going to save charges of the weapon for later on, because I never know when I'm going to strictly want to be continuing to use it to clear stuff out.
For justice! Justice!
Now. Ooh, you're in trouble now.
Oof, times like these, I wish I had kept that,
Tadingo! Yeah!
kept that extra charge.
Ready to ride! Reporting for duty.
Hey, give me a minute!
I'm ready. I'm not ready.
Hey, give me a minute!
Battle.
Surprise Warlock death! So again, didn't get used to hero paladin, hero power from the paladin a lot, just because we curved out so well with most of the stuff that we played. So there you go. Unlocking every hero, and you get 100 extra gold.
Soul shall be mine.
We now have the
You've unlocked expert level opponents, but they won't go easy on you. You got enough gold to buy a card pack. Head to the shop.
So from here, there's a couple different things that you can start doing. You can either go into the solo adventures and beat all of the expert level AI opponents. You can go and complete a game in play mode and get that extra card pack. You can enter the arena and try and play through that. Of those three things, I would definitely not recommend entering the arena yet. This is a different type of challenge that I honestly think needs its own tutorial video, which I will do probably next week. You could go in and do the expert level AIs, but that's a challenge that will always be there. So that's 100 gold that will essentially always be waiting, and it's not holding up your progress over here, which is that First Blood quest to complete a game in play mode. The nice thing about completing these quests, these early quests, is that they will then unlock actual quests that you will get on a daily basis later. So From here, I think what we're going to do is we're going to build the basic Warlock deck, and then just to show that off and use that in the basic play mode. So Warlock is probably the most unique class, and there's a reason why I think the game leaves it to the end for you to unlock. And apparently, when I was saving all of these deck lists, I did not save my Warlock deck. So, I'm rebuilding this from memory. Let's see. And Double Shadow Bolt, Hellfire, Silvering Light. Succubus on the surface looks like a really good card, but that Battlecry discard a random card is not great for this specific effect of getting a 4/3 on the board for 2. So I would recommend not using it. Again, we'll start building from the basic shell. One thing I probably will skip over in this case is Gnomish Inventor. Not because it's not a great card, and not because drawing a card is not good, but because the Warlock hero power is 2 mana, deal 2 damage to yourself, draw a card. So it's not as strictly necessary as it is, I think, in other decks where you kind of want that card draw to keep refilling your hand as you go. And last but not least, Bluegill Warrior. So here is the basic Warlock, and let's actually get this up on screen here. There we go. Alright. And once you're in play mode, there's 2 different ways you can play. You can do casual matches, which is finding an opponent of equal skill and play for fun, which is fine. You can also do ranked matches. Honestly, either one. Rank 25 is fairly low pressure. Casual is fairly low pressure. In this case, I think we're going to go with ranked play because especially when you're at 25, it's much more likely that you're going to find an opponent who is more similar in skill to you than through casual play, which has the chance of putting you up against somebody who is probably not meant to be playing against you. It's fairly good at matchmaking, but it's not great. So for your first experience, I would probably actually recommend going through ranked down to about 20. One, because it lets you unlock a card back, which is just, fun and kind of cool to have. Second, because it's the matchmaking, I think, is a little bit better at those early stages of ladders for somebody using just these basic cards. So we're going to dive headfirst into the ladder to complete the play mode quest. Playing against opponents is going to be a little bit different than playing against the Innkeeper. Mostly in the sense that
Gul'dan versus Jaina.
You'll feel more pressure.
You asked for it.
But because of the way the game is set up, I think that there's actually not that sort of hardship put on you with the early game. So with this, could have mulliganed for something, but I think actually having these early cards in hand is good. Had we had turn 3, we could have played Coin on turn 2 to the Razorfen Hunter. But ultimately that is not going to be necessary. So we're going to hold on to the Coin for later. Still going along that plan. I could have played the Bloodfen Raptor there, but I feel like the opponent is probably holding something that can deal with it.
Ready to ride.
Like that.
We must cleanse the Sunwell.
There we go.
Tazingo!
Push forward.
I could have traded for the minion there, but I think in this case, because we have a way to stop aggression, it wasn't strictly necessary. And next turn we can play the Shadowy Bolt plus the Swamp Ooze or the Bluegill Murloc, or the Bluegill Murloc plus the Swamp Ooze.
Push forward.
And so far we haven't really had an opportunity where we've needed to draw a card yet. There's some decks that actually rely on this particular button to continually be drawing more cards and playing with health pools and that sort of thing. This isn't one of them. So this turn we have 6 mana to play around with, so I think... Yep, there we go. And this is a great card in certain decks, and actually Priest can benefit from something like this because it does have, again, that big butt on it that you can continually heal. In Mage, it doesn't make quite as much sense.
Ready to ride!
So I could play out the Stormwind Champion and do some even trades here, but I think actually we have 3, 5, and 7. With these two... Sorry, with these two being able to trade in. Actually, no, never mind. This is an interesting turn, because there's a couple different lines of play, all of which can be correct. I think, though...
Don't mess with Tusker!
Playing it like that is better. Because this does give us, if he doesn't deal with enough things on board, the potential for lethal next turn.
Handle it!
Unfortunately, we don't have it, so...
Behold the might of Stormwind!
Suck steel, swine!
So because we're now at the point where we're basically just top decking, here's where this hero power becomes super useful. Because I will be drawing 2 cards every turn, they will basically be drawing 1. So eventually we are going to just completely outvalue them. such as here. 6, 8. And when you're tapping and doing this kind of top deck dance with stuff, you always want to tap first before you make any plays, with very few exceptions. I'll go to face. Good enough.
Tazdingo!
Opponent decided to commit suicide by fireball, which is their prerogative. And there you go. Our first game in play mode. Eagerly. As a reward, you get a pack. And a brand new quest. So this quest is still part of the introductions quest. So what I would recommend doing is continuing to play in play mode just to get that next 100 gold. And again, these will continue to unlock further quests. So let's play 3 more games. We're going to choose, I think, a different one. So let's go with the Priest, just because that can be a fun deck to play with. And it's not necessarily something that you get to see a lot, but as you kind of go through the play mode games, you can choose to level up a hero, you can choose to get used to a deck archetype, or you can just choose to play the field and see what fits your particular personality as far as heroes go.
I will fight with honor.
The light shall bring victory.
Alright, let's get rid of these higher drops and see if we can get something a little bit more useful. Perfect. So I'm choosing to play the River Crocolisk turn 1 like this, because next turn I expect that he will end up making a guy, and that will give me a great target for my Elven Archer. Oh, so this is somebody who has more cards. But the nice thing is it does give us an opportunity to use that out of hand and deal with something on his board. We could have played the Elven Archer there and used up the mana a little bit more efficiently, but I don't strictly think it was necessary to do that. And again, still had that 1 mana card. Not strictly necessary to use it yet.
Silver Moon shall not fall.
But there's a good place to use it at.
One shot, one kill.
Don't mess, Tusker.
It's interesting because I don't know exactly... Obviously, you don't know exactly which cards at any point that an opponent will end up playing. But you can usually have a fairly decent idea.
We must cleanse the Sunwell.
I'll give it a shot.
In this case, though, I have no idea what's coming out of his deck.
Reporting for duty.
Push forward.
Again, normally I like to outvalue and heal and heal and heal, but there's not a lot of cards that paladins have that just deal 1 damage, that are just efficient enough to deal with something like this.
Behold,
usually it's either 2 damage or 3 damage or something along those lines.
Push forward.
2 or 3 damage, or 4 damage with their weapon. Which, speaking of weapon, let's prevent the ogre from being eaten by one.
The gates are open.
Reporting for duty.
Pass me that Arclight spanner!
Me smash.
Push forward.
And normally I would love to save that for both weapons to deal with them, but because I have the other one in hand, I actually feel pretty comfortable about seeing if I can bait it out.
Pass me that Arclight spanner! Hey, give me a minute!
A good lesson on why it's always important to play the card draw before you play out another minion.
Reinforcements requested. Back from the junkie.
How to deal with this?
Hey, give me a minute!
So I could play something out at this point, but I don't think it is strictly necessary to do so.
Reporting for duty.
Did someone say bomb?
One more! Oh.
Error 37.
Interesting choice.
Hey, give me a minute!
Trying to keep this out of consecrate range.
Reporting for duty. Tadingo! Yes!
Powering up. Portals online.
Reporting for duty.
top deck wars are real.
Reporting for duty.
My eyes are open.
What you looking at?
Ogre is king. I'm going to be a little embarrassed if I lose this matchup.
Reporting for duty.
Behold the might of Stormwind!
Job done.
My shield for Argus!
Reporting for duty.
For the Alliance!
This is just a really weird assortment of cards from my opponent.
Reporting for duty.
For the Alliance!
Magic detected.
Reporting for duty.
For the Alliance!
We must cleanse the Sunwell.
Woohoo! Starting to get the value here.
Justice.
Reporting for duty.
Is someone injured?
I'm almost out of cards. I'm out of cards.
Uh-oh.
For the Alliance!
Push forward.
Shields up. Red alert.
Reporting for duty.
Alright, and we finally win this game.
For the Alliance!
Right away.
Push forward.
Right away.
There we go. It took the entire deck of cards, but we got it. Well, except for 2 cards.
One more level, and you'll unlock another card.
Nifty. Alright, let's go with a different different deck for the next one. Let's go with Warrior. Let's see how this one performs. And again, I'm just going to keep using these basic decks. I'm not going to use any of the newer cards that we've unlocked as part of the levels, just to give you an idea how effective these decks can be
Your soul shall be mine!
when you're just starting out.
Victory or death!
This is not really a 3-drop, so I'm actually going to send it back. This is a card you want to play in conjunction with other things, so that you can charge them out, like the Senjin Shield Master, or even the Acidic Swamp Ooze later on. this can be a really devastating card in the right deck.
Ready for action!
Again, normally I would probably actually wait to play something like this out, but I want to answer the 1-2 that's being played now, before something else can come on the board and in response to that.
I wonder.
Okay, it's a good use of that. It's a good answer to what we had there. Particular case, again, this is probably not a 3-drop, so more than likely, unless he presents something on the board that I absolutely have to deal with, I'm not going to play out against it. Get that out of the way. See, that's the type of thing you actually want to have earlier in your hand as the weapon.
Taste my steel!
What's interesting about a card like that big taunt, like the Felguard, is that it's not actually that good because it puts you so far behind on the board, or so far behind on mana. Unless you're running a really, really, really low curve deck, it's just not very good. And even when you're running a low curve deck, there's better options.
Get behind me.
Alright, and here's exactly why we run Heroic Strike.
Tadingo!
Hey, give me a minute.
And again, can't be afraid to use your health total to clear stuff out in order to keep board presence. Oh, somebody has an axe.
Don't mess with Tusker.
Hey, give me a minute.
And that was actually a mistake. I should have played out the Warsong Commander on the same turn as those.
For the king!
Do I have to?
So that actually is a great opportunity
Behold the might
for
of
Storm Championship.
Give me a minute.
So unfortunately this deck doesn't have a way to deal with the Imp. We just don't have the cards unlocked to do that.